Well, I can't say that I didn't think that was going to happen. Alright, I'm gonna give people a second to trickle in. Meanwhile, I am gonna do some work. We all knew. That's right. I know, I'm sorry. So, I'm gonna give everybody a little bit more time. I know there was like 50 people in here. We'll wait till we get like 20, 25. Alright, so here's the secret. Everybody always tries to come up with the recipe of how many of this to how many of that, right, to making the oil a certain strength so it's not too strong or so that it's strong enough. Why? Why is that even a variable? Make the oil you're infusing, whether it be 1 cup, 2 cups, 3 cups, or whatever, make it as strong as you can possibly make it. That's it. Make it as strong as you can possibly make it. Alright? Make sure that you decarb it fully. Alright? Don't over decarb it. Okay, and make sure that the procedure you're following for decarbing is proper. Alright? How many of you guys are decarbing in a water bath? Double boiler, right? With the water on the stove. How many of you guys are doing that? No, wait, I want to see how many of you guys are doing that. Okay, so in the meantime, I'm going to keep talking. I'm going to tell you guys what you're going to do after you decarb your material or whatever is you're going to infuse your oil of choice, whether it's coconut, MCT, olive, whatever, butter, whatever you want, right? You're going to infuse that for a long time while it's being constantly agitated on low heat, right? Because you're not trying to decarb anything. You don't need a higher temperature. You just want the lower temperature so that it infuses together. All right. And then you're going to make sure that that oil is like totally maxed out by re-infusing it one more time with a second batch of material that you've decarbed. My wife just pulled in because I can tell my Bluetooth just connected. Hold on, I'll be right back. stuff, get the kids in. Always try and help mom when she gets back. Okay, so yeah, so you're gonna infuse the oil a second time. It's really hard to get the oil up to full saturation, right? Different types of oils, based on their fat content and their molecular structure, can only hold up to a certain amount of THC in them by weight. So usually they say like fat, like the higher the fat content, the higher the THC, because the fat and the THC bind together. So the higher the fat content of the oil, the more THC you can bind to it. So typically the first time that you infuse a batch of product through it, unless you're taking like just a straight mason jar of hash, decarbing it, filling it up with oil, and then straining it later, you know, you really aren't going to hit full saturation on oil on the first pass. So it's really, really a good idea to do a second pass using that oil that's already been infused like it's virgin oil, and re-infusing it with a fresh batch of decarbed material, right? So if you have a pound of material, instead of processing it all at one time, split it into 2 batches, right? Run the first batch through, go ahead and strain it when you're all done, and then use that oil and run the second batch of material through that same oil. It's going to be a way better end product, okay? So decarb it right, okay? Run it through your oil 2 times, right? Double dose your oil, and then make sure that you're using an emulsifier. I personally avoid soy products, so I do not recommend soy lecithin. You can use sunflower lecithin. Sunflower lecithin is an emulsifier which will help all of the ingredients bind together more efficiently, right? And at a higher rate, and it'll also help the absorption rate into your system as well, right? So research has shown, for example, with what was it, vitamin fucking B or fucking, what was it, I can't remember which vitamin it was, but they tested the absorption rate with and without having an added emulsifier. And without the emulsifier, it was only about 16% absorption rate, and with it, it bumped up into the high 60s. So that, just picture what that does in your bloodstream and in your body for the edible and the THC, right? So MCT is a medium chain triglyceride, and it's because there's long chains and medium chains and blah 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 and all these different types of molecule makeups, right? The way that they're bonded together, and the MCT oil is it pretty much gets into your system faster because of the way that because of their medium chains, basically. So you have to look up the science on it. I can't really explain the science on it that well, but I know that MCT oil is way higher absorption than just regular coconut oil. So yeah, you're gonna double infuse it, and then you're gonna use an emulsifier. I recommend using just like a teaspoon to a tablespoon per batch. You don't need a whole lot, and just mix that in when you start infusing the oil of your choice with your material, and you'll be good to go. So typically I like to use hash rosin though, so I don't have any real filtration to do. Once I combine my rosin and my oil, I can combine my emulsifier. But if you're using rosin chips or something else that's still going to need to be filtered, then you're going to want to combine your oil and your decarbed material and fuse it together, filter it, and then combine that with your emulsifier, and then you're good to go. And I highly recommend making the oil again as strong as you possibly can. And then here's how you go about dosing it. For dosing it, what you're gonna do is you're gonna get it tested. It's not hard to get your product tested. If you don't want to get it tested, that's fine. But here's what you need to know is now you need to keep a track log of your decarbed material, how much you're using of this shit in every recipe, right? I highly recommend that you start really small because this shit's gonna be stronger than your ordinary edible oil that you're used to probably. You decarb it properly. Now, I wanna go back to the question. How many of you guys are decarbing in water with the double boiler method? I didn't see anybody answer that. What's up, Laylo? Alright, so I guess you guys don't want to get put on blast. Don't worry, I used to do it in water with the double boiler method too. Alright. Here's what people don't know about water. Water's not going to get up to a high enough temperature to properly decarb your material. You should be doing the double boiler method with oil. Okay, so water, the maximum temperature water can get to before it becomes a gas or a vapor is 212 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, that's physics. The coldest it can get is 32 degrees. Now it can heat up hotter than that, but it has to be in a gas form. So unless you're doing it in a completely sealed pot like a pressure cooker, it's not going to get up to temperature because the gas will help get up to temperature, but then you're probably going to explode whatever's inside. So water only gets up to 212 degrees. And it evaporates very rapidly from the surface at 212 degrees. Let's see. And then, so oil. Sorry, I lost track. I was looking at work shit. So oil is what you need to be using for the double boiler method. The reason why is oil is going to get up to like around 450, I think. Do a quick Google search. So here's the smoke points for these different oils. Safflower oil can get up to 510, soybean 495, corn 475, peanut 440, sesame 420, and olive 375. The exact temperatures will also depend on how pure the oil is. Those are smoke points, not boiling points, smoke points. So basically what I'm telling you is if you're decarbing in boiling water, you've probably found that your edibles are lacking because they're not properly decarbed. If you want to, yeah, see, Mountain Man, you're on point. If you do it in a pressure cooker, exactly, you can get it up to temperature in a pressure cooker because of the gas, right? They control the temperature by letting off gas in there. Gas heats up way hotter than the water because the molecules are spread out and moving faster. Any oil, really, any oil will get you up to a proper decarb temp of 230 to 250, depending on what material you're working with and how fast you want the decarb process to go. But ideally, you want to do a double boiler, and you want to go ahead and use oil and get it up to temperature before you put your decarb or your material that you want to decarb in. You're going to go ahead and put your material in once the oil is already up to temperature, and then you can start the clock right away. Ovens are typically good if you have a brand new oven, it works better. So the reason that ovens, like standard kitchen ovens, are not very good for consistent decarbs is because there's a large fluctuation in temperature before the heat turns off and back on. So let's say your set point in the oven is at 240. It might get all the way up to like 255, and it might get as cold as like 230, 225 before the flames kick all the way back on and get the temperature back up. So that fluctuation is not good when you're trying to time your decarb and get everything proper. So if you're trying to go for a more consistent, reliable decarb, it's gonna be, depending on the temperature you're running, you're gonna run hotter for shorter times, right? And there's charts online that will tell you how much time to run it for depending on what temperature you're running it at. But use a toaster oven, right? They're smaller, they maintain their temperature a little bit better. And you can Google which ones out there are good at holding their temperature the best. It might be a little bit pricey, but think about it. The difference between a really good decarb and a half-assed decarb is edibles that you think are worthy of eating and edibles that you think are not worth a damn. You know what I'm saying? Like edibles that smack you on your ass 5 times, or edibles that you're just like, it didn't do anything for me. That's the difference between a proper decarb and a non-proper decarb. So it's super critical that if you're going to make edibles on any routine basis, that you at least have a consistent decarb method, and then save the oven for baking your fucking muffins or your cookies or brownies or whatever you're making. Decarb your shit in something a little bit more stable. My opinion. Those are the tips and tricks. Shout out Uncle Joe in the house, and then J-Rock, ready to hit that fire. Those are the tips and tricks right there. That's how I personally, you can absolutely reuse the oil that you boil in. Think about it. You put a clean pot on the stove. You pour in enough oil to, set your jar in that you need to set in, right? You're gonna have the lid sealed on tight, and you're gonna go ahead and get your oil up to temperature. You could put a temperature probe in it or use an IR gun and just scan the top of it. And once your oil is up to temperature, you set your jar in there. Depending on the temperature that you're using, you look at the chart and you see how long you need to let it decarb for. You can also look at it once it stops bubbling. It's pretty much good to go. If you let it go too much longer than that, you're gonna get to a point where it's just gonna be like dead and not do shit. It's J-Rock, it keeps its temp, but it fluctuates a lot, right? The oven fluctuates. It's like, It's like getting in and out of a pool, but trying to stay the same temperature. And you're getting in and out of the pool, in to cool off, and then you're getting out to warm up. But you're just trying to stay one stable temperature. That's what an oven is like. It's just a constant swing back and forth, trying to maintain a balance. So you need to get a smaller pool, per se, or a smaller device that's more consistent with keeping its temperatures, and it'll help limit that range so you stay more within that decarb range, and you'll get a more consistent decarb. So yeah, just to summarize real quick, all of those. Get a proper decarb, right? Infuse it twice. Use an emulsifier, sunflower lecithin, okay? And then make sure that you accurately dose it. So here's why I make my oil, and here's the key. Here's the key to dosing. I almost forgot. So the key to dosing when you use this method is to make the oil as potent as you possibly can. So let's say that you're going to make an edibles recipe that calls for half a cup of oil. You're going to start off by making it so that you use maybe a quarter cup of your concentrated oil, and then a quarter cup of non-concentrated, just regular oil, right? And you're gonna see how that plays out as far as how strong that recipe is. Do it for yourself, okay? I would recommend making whatever your actual infused oil is, pretty much a quarter or a half of the total oil that they're calling for in the recipe, right? And that should basically get you where you fucking want to be, right? And then from there, you know, you guys should know basic dosing for edibles, how much you put in, how many pieces you get out, how strong the oil was to begin with, divide it, right? So that's why I said you make a really, really strong oil, you get it tested, and then you'll know how many actual milligrams of THC are in, you know, 1 milliliter of my oil. All right, now how many milliliters did I put into this recipe? All right, so this is how much total THC went into this recipe, and I created 16 pieces total. So divide it by 16, and boom, here's the actual dosage for my edibles. You know what I'm saying? So it's really easy. If you test the concentrated oil, then you just have to know how much you added to the total recipe, and you know how much THC you added, and then divide it how many pieces you got out of it, and there's your dosage, and it's accurate. It's not that bullshit street dosage. I added 2 grams of rosin, so I think my rosin's about 80% THC because I'm the shit. So that gives me 800 milligrams per gram. Oh yeah, so, you know, I added 1600 milligrams of THC. No, the fuck you didn't. No, the motherfuck you did not. You can't just estimate, oh, I added a gram. That's 1,000 milligrams. I got 10 pieces. They're 100 milligrams each. Boom, blow my fucking brains out. Every time I see somebody display, I'm so irate about it, I'm like spitting. Every time I see somebody display a dosage on their homemade edibles, just because they weighed the amount of product they went into it, it makes me fucking laugh like a giddy little girl. Like, either A, you're just hyping yourself up, like you're blowing smoke up your own ass, you don't understand how dosing works, or you're just a Chad. Like, I don't know. I just, that shit blows my mind. So yeah, definitely what Chester's saying is you don't want to have so much oil always want to have the ability to pull back the oil, right? So let's say your recipe calls for, and look, here's the thing. Things like gummies, you don't need a lot of oil for those. The only reason you're adding oil to your gummies in the first place is to introduce the THC. So the less oil you add, the better your gummies are gonna come out, typically, right? And you're also using the oil to cut the strength of the terpenes and the actual THC itself, because both of those things can be kind of harsh on their own taste-wise as well as chemically. So you use the carrier oil is what they call it when you use another oil to carry a stronger, more concentrated oil. You use a carrier oil. Like with essential oils, anytime you're going to apply a topical oil to your skin, it's very dangerous to apply a concentrated oil. You have to use a carrier oil in most cases, unless it's just a tiny amount. Like peppermint oil in small amounts is fine, but like rosemary, oregano, things like that can be very harsh. Terpenes, myrcene, limonene, all those other ones, they can be very harsh, just like oregano and rosemary and thyme. So they require a carrier oil in most cases to make them more palatable. Yeah, Jeremiah read. So if you make your oil super concentrated to where it's so concentrated that it's like you barely need any of it, right? You can then figure out, all right, what's the right amount of oil for my recipe, right? Total oil, just total, right? Let's say you're making cookies and you're using a half cup of oil and you're like, oh, that's too much. I only need a third of a cup, right? You can now cut down to a third of a cup, but still keep your potency insanely high, because you can just change the ratio. So if you were doing a half a cup before and it was a half of your medicated oil versus, and half of your non-medicated oil, right? So a quarter cup and a quarter cup, and now you're going down to overall just a third of a cup. Maybe now you can just use, a half and half of that mixture and it'll still be just as potent. Or you can just go all with your medicated oil and use a third of a cup, right? So you can play with it. You have more room to mess around with it because you can dilute it if you need to, right? Or you can run with it full strength. But chances are, if you make the oil with the instructions that I just gave you, you yourself are not, it's granted you start with good material, you yourself are not going to want to even, use just the concentrated oil. You're going to want to dilute it. And that's what I do. I save up to the point where I can make a huge concentrated batch. I'll double infuse it and then go from there. This round, and here's the thing, I personally have gone from the very basics of extraction and solventless infusing, fucking making butter and with buds and trim, to hash, to this, I'm now at the point where the pinnacle for me is making super fucking concentrated RSO and then infusing that with MCT oil and using that in edibles, right? I have like probably 2 pounds of ice cream cake nugs from my last single source harvest that weren't the highest quality, but to wash anyways, they came out good looking nugs. But I'm gonna RSO them, just straight RSO the nugs, and I'm gonna get everything off those motherfuckers, and then I'm gonna go ahead, evap the RSO, decarb it, right? Then I'm going to infuse that with the MCT oil and the emulsifier, and then I'm going to use that to dose my edibles. Yikes, that's gonna be strong. I have like so much shit, like tech wise, that I've learned over the years making different types of edibles. It's crazy. So many failed tests. What do you think about decarbing in an air dryer in a mason jar? What do you mean an air dryer? Alright, so my RSO process is stick your material in a big ass mason jar, stuff it full, cover it with alcohol, grain alcohol, you know, like a 200 proof, 190, something like that, and then put it in the fridge or in the freezer. And obviously you want your material, your mason jar, and your alcohol to all be frozen, right, when you start. And then you're gonna go ahead and put your material into the frozen mason jar, cover it with the ice cold alcohol, and then you want to go ahead and put it in the freezer, and you're gonna shake it once a day for like a week. Now, typically if you're making RSO, you do not care about the color. If you're making RSO that you want to be that super fucking hot fire, I only spit that hot shit, my name is Dylon, then you're gonna only want to shake it for like a half a second. Like literally you're gonna pour your alcohol in and you're gonna go shake, shake, done, drain it. Collect that, evap it, boom. There's your first batch of super fire RSO. That's gonna be like an amazing color, right? Especially if you vacuum seal it and decarb it after. But yeah, what I'm doing right now is I have all of my rosin pucks stuffed in a huge mason jar. I'm gonna cover it all with the alcohol. I'll leave it in the chest, the ice chest over there, and then I'll just shake it every day. At the end of the week, I'll go ahead and drain it into a rice cooker that has a ventable lid. I'll put it on low and I'll evap it off, right? And once all the alcohol is evapped off, I'll go ahead and pour it out onto a mat, and then I'll finish decarbing it. So yeah, I have a Levo 2 that I could use for infusing, but they don't do large amounts. Neither does the Magic Butter machine. If you're doing like an ounce at a time, those things are great. But who the fuck wants to do that? Who in the fuck wants to do an ounce at a time? I don't. Not me. Do. What is this shit? Make sure you're following my backup account on Instagram. Apparently I'm gonna have to set up another backup account too. God fucking damn it. Play on that bullshit again. And they still have not hit me up to let me know that they verified my Facebook business account so that I can start running ads and get this shit resolved. It's fucking annoying. Ridiculous. Derek. Rewind about 30 minutes and we were actually talking about decarbing under vacuum to lower the boiling point. Yes, sir. We talked about that earlier. You must be one of those extraction guru guys. Shit, you fancy, bruh. I don't know a lot of people that actually know that. Ooh. Anyways, I'm gonna take off and go eat some food, and I'll be back later with that Grow Room Gang members only. We're gonna holler about some Grow Room tech, talk about drybacks, EC buildup, managing salt buildup, managing uptake in the root zone. It's gonna be dope. Members only though. So if you're not a member, make sure you go to my main page, youtube.com/solventlessbaconvape. Make sure you're on desktop mode. Go to youtube.com from the browser on your phone. Go to the settings for your browser, put it in desktop mode, and then if you go to my page, you'll be able to see the join button. Click join, pick a membership level, hop on that members only shit. We're gonna talk about a lot of shit because we're making some changes in here. We're seeing some changes, and we need to start taking some new data points to see if we see a shift in the progress of these plants. So sign up. We'll be back in about an hour or two, and I'll catch you guys later. Yeah, that OnlyFans hashtag.